Randy, can you, I know that you're on that one, but can you start that other PowerPoint for me? Judges. Well, it's on the desktop. Click on it. Double click on it, actually. It's going to come up on your screen, but it won't. Okay, on the lower right-hand corner, there's a little button that looks like a screen. Clear to the right on the bottom. It's presentation mode, actually. Yeah, slideshow, presentation. There it goes. Why is it? Oh, there we go. It's loading slowly, isn't it? Wow. What's running on that at the same time? Is there something else running? If the Pro Presenter is still running, you can shut that down because that's going to use a lot of. Okay. All right, that's fine. I mean, I've got the remote, so. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're in the book of Judges today for Sunday school class. You have your handout, yes? Fill in the blank. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, thanks. All right. So we've left Joshua, right? We've entered into the land. We're in the promised land, and Joshua is not going to be in charge anymore. We're not going to have one individual leader as in the past. You know, Moses led them out of Egypt. Joshua led them into Canaan, and now we're going to get the nation of Israel inside of this land. And what you're going to see is something that's going to be repeated over and over again in the nation of Israel, which is the cyclical. You're going to see them have a high point in their spirituality. You're going to see them fall. They're going to be rescued, and they're going to be lifted back up to a high point, and then they're going to fall. And this is going to happen over and over and over again. And what that shows us is a lot about our own humanity when it comes to spirituality. We tend to do well for a period of time, and then we tend to mess up. And God saves us or redeems us or rescues us. And we climb back up again. We do well for a period of time, and then we fall. Okay? So there are going to be some clues in here as to how to stop that from happening. But you're going to see that the cycle is always going to be there. Okay? The temptation is always going to be before us. How do we get through that? How do we beat that? Well, Genesis, obviously, we're going through these. I don't know if this is coming up exactly the way it is on your screen, but Genesis, you look at and tell somebody from the picture, just tell me what Genesis is about. Okay, so, yep. We have the seed promised, right? Exodus, delivery. Yep, baby's born. Nation of Israel's developed. Out of Egypt she came. Leviticus. Well, it says that right on the thing. It's kind of cheating, isn't it? It's family, yeah. Family rules, I think. And that doesn't mean like your family rules, right? Like your family's the best. It's family rules, right? Like, you know, okay, you get it. Oh, Numbers. Time out. That's right. Exactly. Wilderness wandering. We didn't do right. God has to say, okay, family, time out. We don't get to go to Cedar Point. We don't get to go to Kings Island. Got to stay home. Deuteronomy, retelling of the rules. That's correct. Why? Why are we retelling the rules? Because of what? New generation. And Joshua will be leading that new generation into the promised land. So the new generation needs to know what the rules are. They need to know how God operates. We're in Judges. And again, we can't sit here and jump into one chapter and study it like we do in a sermon. We just don't have that time to get through a book. We're trying to give you the overall theme and the development of the book rather rapidly. So let's go through three things. You have three divisions on your paper, yes? Okay. Here's the first division you're going to see when they enter into the land. It's chapters 1 through 3, and that is the deterioration. Okay? So the nation of Israel is going to come in. This is kind of what is gut-wrenching. They come in on a victory, right? God leads them in. They're going to conquer nations or tribes, let's call that. I mean, what we think of today as a nation, rather large. Back then, they were more like city-states, controlling a small territory. Anyway, they're going to conquer all of those city-states, all of those areas around them, and they're going to gain control of Israel, all of the land of Israel, or Canaan, as it was called. And it's really interesting. I used this logic this week on a friend that I was sharing with about God being in existence. I said, where did Israel come from? They said, well, what's that got to do with the Bible? And I said, goes to show how well you know the Bible, right? I said, if Israel is the nation out of which we get the Jews, out of which came out of the Old Testament, from Abraham, that land still exists today. They're fighting over it today because the Bible says that they're going to fight over it until the very end when Jesus comes back, right? Where did that nation come from? That was a good piece of arsenal. When non-believers don't know the Bible, they just think Israel was developed in 1948. And Israel has been around for a long time. Long, long time. So, you see in chapters 1, verse 1 through chapters 2, verse 5, you see an indifference, right? It is spiritually, doesn't matter to us. Do whatever you want to do. We'll do whatever we want to do. Well, it doesn't work very well. In 2:6 through 3, chapter 3, verse 4, now here's how it builds. You start out with everybody saying, well, it really doesn't matter. It's okay if the spiritual temperature of our people group starts to diminish. It's not that big of a deal. Just under boiling point's okay with me. We don't have to be on fire. Not only that, those who are on fire, they're kind of nuts anyway. A little bit spiritual freaks, It's okay if we bring the temperature down a little bit. The problem is when we start we start having this indifference and we start saying it really doesn't matter, the next thing is able to make its way in. And that is the beginning of idolatry, right? And this isn't the beginning of it. The nation of Israel has had a problem with this for a long time, but it's going to slip back in. In 2:6 through 9, you're going to see Joshua's death. He's not going to be in charge anymore, which is interesting that in 2:6 through 3:4, you see a level of idolatry sneaking back in, and it's very interesting that 2:6 through 9, if Joshua had been there, I don't think the idolatry would have slipped back in. What's that tell you about replacing your leaders? You had better make sure that the people that you bring in have a passion and a love for God, hopefully as great as what you have. And they'll lead in such a way that will keep the ship going. I'm going to be around for a while, unless God maybe takes me home today. I never know. So you have Joshua's death in chapter 2. Then you have this bridging verse that happens in chapter 2, 10 through 13. This verse begins to show you how we got, where we're going to get from where we have been, right, with Joshua, to where we're going to be in this book. And it says, after the whole generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up. Okay, stop right there. Who's the whole generation that's been gathered to their fathers? What generation is that? Joshua's generation, yes. So all the people who came into the land with Joshua, who knew who God was, understood what he had done for them, seen his glory, right? They're all living for the Lord. Spiritual temperature's high. They're going to all die off. This is a scary thing too in a church. When a certain generation of people die off, if that generation have not put into the generation that's coming after them that wisdom, that enthusiasm, that passion, that love for Christ dies off with that generation. Okay, so the whole generation had been gathered to their fathers. Another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. This is idolatry, okay? They forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshiped various gods of the peoples around them. This is how Moloch begins to be worshipped. Trying to think of the other guy. I can't. It's gone. Moloch, stick with him. He's a good bad guy to hate. Okay? They provoked the Lord to anger because they forsook him and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths. Okay, now, I think I know the next screen. Tell me what happened. Tell me what went wrong here in the book of the Judges. Why do we need these people? By the way, can anybody, from the title of the book, can anybody tell me what the book is about? It is about judging, but they are judges.
They are spiritual leaders who God raises up to rescue the Israelites.
That's correct. Sometimes they're not spiritual leaders. Sometimes they're just people God uses, to deliver his nation. We would like to see them as spiritual leaders, but often they're not. They're just, what's that? The right people in the right time, at the right time. Yeah, they're not necessarily even spiritual or faith heroes. They may end well. Samson ends well, but he isn't anything spiritually heroic or spiritually dynamic in his life. They are a lot like politicians. Yeah.
Didn't Gideon rebuild the altars that he had torn down that was his father's?
Yeah, but Gideon's son is going to kill off all the rest of Gideon's children. And he's going to be considered a judge, and we'll see that here in a little bit. Here's what I think happened that went wrong. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7, and it's repeated in chapter 11, verse 19. Now, remember, this is law, okay? And God said this, to impress them upon your children regarding the law. Impress the laws on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Why is this repeated twice in the law? What do you think God wants the generation that is most senior What do you think he wants them to do? Pass their wisdom. He wants them to take the children, take your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. And we are supposed to be training them up in a way that when they understand what we've said, they won't soon depart from it, right? So the way we live our lives in front of those who are coming behind us is very, very important. And the fact that we talk to them about it is very, very important. And that generation who had seen that, I'm not complaining about that generation. I'm not saying they were terrible. I'm saying, here's what happened. They saw the greatness of God and the goodness of God, and it brought them into the nation of Israel, but they forgot to tell the people behind them. They forgot to share those stories with them. And the kids raised up, they didn't know God, and they didn't know what God had done. He's raising his hand. I'm not just calling on him. Yeah.
I think part of the issue here
Yep.
is that we don't want our children to have to sacrifice.
Yeah.
We don't want them to have to suffer.
We want them to have it better than what we had it.
Exactly. And that's a fool's errand.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, oftentimes we fail to nurture them in the Lord. We want to fix things for them. You know, we don't want them to experience life the way it really is. But there's also some real interesting research. This is pretty old now, it's probably about 20 years old. But people who study parenting and child rearing will tell you that in American culture, children are influenced more than 80% of the time by people other than their parents. A large part has to do with they're sent off to public school as real small children. And as a result of that, you know, you have the old Freudian idea that, you know, it's the parents that are failing. In a sense, the parents can do a really good job, but unfortunately there are lots of other influences that children have that then impact the choices they make. Because in the end, children are free moral agents. They have the ability to choose. So if your parents say, you know, you need to save your money so someday you can buy your house, and a friend says, you need that new Corvette. Okay, or the culture says you need to do this or do that, or your parent says, you know, abusing drugs and alcohol are going to be a problem, okay, you know, but my friends and all my friends, you know, are doing that, okay, so it becomes, I think, a broader question of, as a church, how do we try to impact the world of our children? By our children, I mean our children that are part of the church.
Right.
You know, how do we try to impact their world in a way that allows them to see the error of that, a lot of that 80-some% in their thinking and their belief system?
And part of that would be to allow them to suffer some of the consequences. You know, we call the generation that came out of World War II, they're called the what? Greatest generation that's ever lived. Why? Man, that group of people, they came out of the Great Depression, went into World War I, went into the Great Depression, came out of World War II. We don't even understand, you know, our culture doesn't understand that we call them the greatest generation ever lived because they understood what it was to sacrifice. They understood what it was to suffer. And then we in turn say, well, let's not let that happen ever again.
Exactly.
Well, if you're not going to let that ever happen ever again, you're never going to get the greatest generation that ever lived. You're going to get the generation of people that say, I don't want to do that. Yeah, you owe me. And so, while we can sit here and look at the book of Judges and say, oh man, they blew it. Scary. All right. You move from indifference then to idolatry, Joshua's death. And then in chapter 3, 5 and 6, now this is where I go back to saying that I'm not certain that when God says to destroy them all, I'm okay if God ordered genocide. Let's put it that way, right? I'm okay if God ordered that. That the nations around them were the children of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They knew God. They should have known God. Their sin had risen to a level where God says no more. The problem is that when we're in Judges, in the book of Judges, in the nation of Israel, he says you can't intermarry with their daughters. I thought they were supposed to all be dead. See what I'm saying? That's where I waffle a little bit. I'm okay. I don't waffle. I say I'm okay with genocide if God ordered it. I don't have a problem with that intellectually or spiritually. God has a right to take whatever form of clay he wants and uses it for his purposes. And when it has reached its purpose and the day of judgment needs to come for that particular people group, God's the one who's going to do that.
There's precedent for this. How many children died in the flood? How many children drowned in the flood?
All of them but Noah's kids.
That's right. So, is God a God of genocide? Or is God a God of judgment? He's a God of judgment.
Absolutely. And that's why I say I have no problem with it. If that's what God is doing, I'm not trying to use these verses to say you need to see God in another way because the God of judgment or a genocidal God isn't a picture that I want you to see. I struggle with it because the facts don't necessarily line up. I look at it and say, why would they have to have a law of intermarriage? Now, it could just be, as I said last week, they just disobeyed God and didn't kill them all off. So God has to make another law that says, don't intermarry with them. I have no problem whatsoever with saying judgment came and God executed that judgment. So, 3 things. Indifference, which moves to idolatry. When you start worshiping other gods from other foreign nations, then you start intermingling with their culture, their wives, and guaranteed, you bring any 2 people together in a family, and you're going to get compromised. Where are you guys going this year for Christmas? Your kids, see? You guys are, yes. The kids have gone elsewhere. It happens, right? You have to start dividing your interests up. That's why God says, don't be unequally yoked in your marriage. I don't think God really minds you going to your in-laws or wherever, your children's house or whatever it is, however it is you divide your time up. But he very much wants Christians to be married to Christians. In the Old Testament, it was Jews be married to Jews. Tribes be married to tribes. Okay. Where is that at? Okay, I went back to the genocidal thing. No big deal. We're not going to read again that. 3 through 15 is the next section. 1 through 3, and it only goes through part of chapter 3. So we pick back up in chapter 3 here and go all the way to chapter 16, I believe, is what you're seeing. That's the best my eyes can make out anyway. So we're going to need to be delivered. So if we deteriorate, come to the point where there's indifference, letting ourselves go into idolatry, letting ourselves get mixed up in families that we shouldn't, worshiping other gods that we shouldn't, now we need to be delivered. And this is where we get into the Judges. You're going to read specifically about them. We're not going to today. I'm just going to help you understand who they are, right? You're going to see Othniel. He's going to deliver or be a judge for 8 years against Aram. Okay, so the top's going to be the judge. chapters and verses are underneath them, numbers of years in which they reign in the arrows. Ehud against the Moabites, 18 years. Shamgar, not really a lot about Shamgar. It's just one event. We don't see anything else about him, so we don't know how long he was a judge or how long he helped deliver the nation of Israel, but it was against the Philistines. Deborah and Barak are two of the judges. Yes, it was not the President Obama. Yes, different Barak. He wouldn't be the leader that God had called him to be, so he went to Deborah, and Deborah said, I'll do it, but you don't get the glory for this, I do. So Deborah serves for 20 years against the tribe or nation of Canaan. Okay, Gideon. Gideon is going to fight against the Midianites, and he's going to lead or be a judge or deliver the nation of Israel for 7 years. Tola and Jair. They're going to fight, this is interesting, they're going to have to deliver against Abimelech. That's a really, does anybody know how Abimelech finally dies in the end? If you don't know this story, you should read this. I can't tell you the lady who does it. Goes up into a bell tower. I believe she takes the anvil, drops it out right on top of his head. The Bible is, that's it, yes. Millstone, thank you, not an anvil. Yes, millstone.
Anvil was Wile E. Coyote.
Yes, thank you. Takes the millstone. I don't know if the anvil's better or worse. It was heavy, yes. Jephthah, 18 years against the Ammonites. Now we're going to have three real fast that we really don't know who they are. We really don't know who they ruled or fought against. It doesn't say much about them. Okay, and you can see the chapters and the verses that are there. And the last one, last judge. Who's the last judge? Samson, yes. He's going to rule, or he's going to be around for 40 years. And he is going to be against the Philistines. Did I move too fast? I'm sorry. I mean, you can yell out at me. I just saw your mom holding her paper over there. You can say, hey, slow down, back up. So you go through these chapters. You just go, who is this and who? Man, in one chapter I'm talking about the Ammonites, and then the other chapter I'm talking about Abimelech, and then I'm talking about Canaan, and I'm talking about the Moabite. I don't get this. This is all moving so fast, and it goes from one set of verses to the next set of verses, and you kind of get lost. Okay, if you're reading the Old Testament for the first time, you read this stuff and you go, I don't know who these people are. I don't know. We're shifting the story so fast that I'm grinding a few gears here, right? So, slow down. It's okay that you get lost. It's okay that you don't understand. Everybody is there for a while. But it's just running through the people that God used to deliver the nation of Israel when they spiritually failed. And almost always, there is a nation behind that, a foreign nation that has moved in and corrupted the nation of Israel. And I don't want to blame the nation. Israel let them move in when they knew that they shouldn't have.
Is there an importance to the book of Judges in showing the nation of Israel was formed with the intention of God being the king?
Yes.
Judges is a time where Israel is floundering, not with
God always wanted Israel to run as a theocracy where God was king. He wanted Israel to be different. Matter of fact, when Israel asks for a king, they ask for a king in order that they might be like all the other nations around them. Okay? That is not what God intended for Israel. Now, God brings first Saul, which was not God's choice. That's the first king of Israel. But then he brings David along afterwards. David is the second king, but the first king under which the nation of Israel will be united.
Could you say Saul was really the last of the judges in the first crown?
I wouldn't say that because there was no deliverance through Saul. Ultimately, there was depravity through Saul. Do I believe, Jordan, is your question, that God uses the book of Judges to set us up for the kings? It sets us up for understanding the kings, but it's not what God originally intended.
But it's something to show Israel. Here I am, here you are with me as a theocracy. Here you are without me and no king. Here you are with a king for a man. And eventually leading to, here's my son.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. God's going to use that for the lineage to be able to be identified so that we can trace it to the person of Jesus Christ. Absolutely. It also goes to show how God is willing to work with man in order to bring man to the point of understanding who God is. He is patient, he is long-suffering, he is merciful, even when we require of him something that he never intended in the first place. He's willing to allow us to suffer in our own stupidity and be there to deliver us when we recognize that we need to get out of this. Yes. 17 through 21, we see the depravity. So we have the deterioration, right? Is that what I started with? To the second one being what? Deliverance. We see all of the judges coming. Now we're going to see ourselves fall again in this book. Now, this Micah had a shrine. He made an ephod and some household gods and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. See, we're back to it's okay if the spiritual temperature isn't at the boiling point. What do you think is going to happen? We're going to fall again, and God's going to have to deliver again. Now, if this keeps being repeated over and over again, which is what the law does, correct? The law is only meant, Paul tells us in Galatians, that the law was only put there to protect us in order that the seed could come. So if we continue to live by the law, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to do well for a while and then fail. Then be delivered and do well for a while and then fail. Okay? God needed to bring a permanent solution to this. So he brings the person of his son, Jesus Christ. But before we get there, okay, here's what you see. In Micah, again, we see idolatry take place again. Chapter 17. In chapter 18, we have immorality, right? So we're not behaving the way God wanted us to when it came to women. We're accepting people outside of our own people group. And please do not think that that means that the church today teaches that there shouldn't be interracial marriages or that there can't be outside of your own ethnic or group, right? I don't believe that at all. I believe they need to be believers in Jesus Christ, is what I believe, right? That is why God kept the marriages within the nation of Israel. They had to worship and follow God. If you don't, you're bringing idolatry in. If you don't marry somebody else who is a believer in Jesus Christ, you're bringing that idolatry with them. And that's going to be, marriage is hard enough without having to have that as well. Okay, chapter 19, this gets a really interesting story, okay? It's the Levite and the concubine. And this just goes to show that anarchy starts taking place. And I don't, guys, you're going to say, why did all this happen? You know, I'm not sure I have a good answer for you, but let me tell you this story as we got a few minutes to go, and I think I can do this. So a Levite, right, one of the people who is supposed to be of the priesthood from the tribe of Levi, has a concubine. And he's traveling, and I can't remember, I think it's Gilead, where he's traveling around. He's in a foreign area because his concubine had left him, so he goes and gets her, and the dad keeps, saying, stay a while, put yourself up, take it easy, rest. And finally he's on his way back into the area of Jerusalem. He wants to get back home. So he's got his woman on his donkey, and they're making their way through, and I believe that they stop somewhere. I know it's within the tribe of Benjamin, okay? And this goes to show what happens with immorality and then anarchy, because much like Sodom and Gomorrah, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, these guys come up and they say, hey, we saw that guy that you brought into your house, bring him out so we can have sex with him. And they're like, oh, you can't do that. Here are a number of my daughters, never slept with a man. Go ahead and do with them what you want. And everybody gets all upset about that as well. But if you understood ancient Near East custom practices of bringing somebody in your home, you understand why that was said. Okay, but the guy, instead of doing that, the guy actually throws the concubine outside. And it says that the men who are out there with her have their way with her until morning, sunrise. So it's been all night long. She's been with these guys. They leave her be. She crawls to the threshold of the door. She's lying there. And she dies. Actually, in the morning, the Levite gets up and says, get up. This is a terrible story. This is what happens when we start falling, right? He says, get up, let's go. She doesn't move. So he grabs her, puts her on the donkeys, and off they go. When he gets home, she's dead. So you know what he does? He cuts her up in 12 portions, sends her to the leaders of each tribe of Israel, and says, this is what Benjamin did. Long story short, right? All this brings all the leaders together. They unite against the nation or the tribe of Benjamin. At this point, not only do we descend from idolatry to immorality to anarchy, now in chapter 20, we're going to see the nation of Israel turn on itself. Because they're going to come against Benjamin and say, give us the men who did this. And they're going to say no. And thousands upon thousands of men will die. And this is where I say God is patient and long-suffering in our own stupidity, to let us experience what we need to experience. But he's there when we're ready to be delivered. In chapter 21, it is the mourning of, not the mourning the sun, the sadness of, the sorrow of, the grief of what they've done as a nation, what has happened. And that's the end of the book. Questions? Comments? You know what needs to happen before we spiritually turn ourselves around? You have to grieve what it is that you've done. You have to come to a point where you're sorrowful, because if we're not sorrowful, right? If I'm not sorrowful for the things I've done, I'm certainly not going to repent. And so we see the cycle beginning all over again. I'll be regretful. I'll be remorseful. God will deliver me. I'll do well for a while. And it's all going to come back again. So real quick, you tell me, what were some of the clues in here that we need to utilize to stop us from going through this cycle? Make sure that we are instructing those who are following us. Make sure you are leading your life in such a way that you can be followed. Because if you're the best that the next generation's going to get, then yeah, we're in big trouble. And I don't mean that to point at you. I'm not, I didn't point my finger at anybody in here saying you're terrible. I'm saying do your own evaluation. Look at the plank in your own eye, because if I'm the best, if I am it, then the next generation isn't going to live the way they should be living. So we need to, as a nation, as a church, turn that spiritual temperature up to the boiling point once again and let the people see us living for God the way we need to be living for Him. Start with them young, yep. Moms and dads, that's what the church really is. The church is an assistant to the parents. It's not a replacement of the parents, right? We come alongside the parents. And we do that because most of you in here with kids these days, you're the ones teaching. You're the one back there. And it becomes very important what we teach. Amen. Absolutely. Yep. Be willing to stand up when you see something not right. Don't accept less than. That doesn't mean you go up to somebody else and say, you're terrible because you're not doing this. Hey, you know what? You want to turn up the spiritual heat in your church? What do? Yeah, it's not about telling another person how bad they're doing. Maybe it's about you living your life a little bit hotter than what you're seeing around you. And I'll tell you what, that will actually stir the other people to do the same. It is my spiritual gift in this world to put my granddaughter to sleep. So she is out. She's forever will say, Grandpa's here. All right, your kids are out. Some of you, your kids are out in the fellowship hall. Go make sure that they don't run off into the street. Other than that, tell them about Jesus.